I'm Joey.T.Cartoon.P, and you're watching the Cartoon Palooza. 2015, what an interesting year to be at the movies. If I told you that Mad Max and Star Wars were the big blockbusters, you would think I were crazy or I was talking about the late 80s or early 90s, but believe it or not, I'm talking about 2015. However, as far as comebacks go for franchises, some did really well, while others didn't. Unlike last year, where I was able to list off the animated movies I hated between the ones I liked, it made it difficult since the movies that weren't nearly as good as the top 5 ended up being pretty decent, with the exception of Home. Yeah, I hated that movie. I think you'll also notice that I didn't include the movie Strange Magic. For reasons known, I just decided I didn't have the time, energy, and money to check out that movie. I also felt that everybody knew that movie was gonna blow. So let's not waste any time. Here are the top 5 favorite animated movies of 2015. This was one of the first movies to come out this year, and I was really anticipating it. I was happy to find out that it met my expectations. Despite not being nearly as good as the movie previous to it, SpongeBob Sponge Out of Water was a decent flick. I'm not sure if you guys noticed already, but I happen to be a huge SpongeBob dork. Mostly through the early seasons, which at one point growing up you would find me watching 2 things on TV. The news, which wasn't often, or SpongeBob. So when you tell me that the original creator was going to help with the story of a second movie for theaters, you bet I was going to get my butt to the nearest cinema to go see it. And from what I had to watch, it was good. If you wanted to get a good throwback to the earlier seasons where most of the humor was surreal, nonsensical, and otherwise trippy, then this is your movie. While I still felt the first movie was slightly better, Sponge Out of Water was still serviceable for fans and general moviegoers alike. My only complaint is the plot, which for most movies based off a TV series, you get the feeling that they took 3 episodes and strung them together. It's pretty much clear that the creators just wanted to get something put together so they can focus on the gags. And another thing I didn't like about this movie is that the marketing seemed to indicate that SpongeBob was going to be a computer animated character for most of the movie. Even the title made it seem like this was going to be a huge deal, and yet it wasn't. SpongeBob doesn't even get out of the ocean for until the 3rd act of the film, which even then, majority of the film is a hand-drawn film. Seems like studios have an extreme anxiety that anything drawn on paper isn't gonna sell, so giving it a computer-generated exoskeleton will equate to box office gold. Added points for making them superheroes to cash in on the Marvel trend, and there you go. Either way, the second SpongeBob movie was worth my time, and most likely be worth yours as well. Between this movie and the other Pixar movie that came out, it's safe to say the studio had a pretty strong year. With that said, the number 4 selection belongs to the Good Dinosaur. I feel a lot of critics have been hard on this film, which I would contribute to its messy production history. However, from what I had to see, this was a very different Pixar movie that took risks I didn't expect. At its core, it's a coming-of-age story, which is pretty standard for animated films, but in its execution, it ends up being a pretty weird journey. I guess you can expect there to be weird moments since the movie's premise revolves around what would happen if dinosaurs didn't go extinct. Now when I say things get weird, let me tell you, things escalate really fast. But with strange detours come some very creative choices. Our main characters can't talk to each other physically, so for most of the movie we have a very visual communication with one another. It isn't a complete pantomime like the movie WALL-E, but it's still fun to see how much of these characters can interact with one another without talking. When this movie had threats, they really don't take shortcuts. Since we're not sure how dinosaurs have continued to evolve with humans, anything can be perceived as a friend or foe. So I feel like our main character is discovering things for the first time, and experiencing the emotions he's going through. But if there's anything this movie does well, it's gotta be the backgrounds. Maroon. Every background in this movie looks like a masterpiece. It reminds me of Bambi and how they focus on the long landscapes and imagery that help establish a tone. For me, the movie probably worked better as an experience rather than a straightforward story, but this is an experience that I would gladly revisit again. I actually almost forgot to include this movie on the list, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I felt like it deserved to be on it. That movie, Shaun the Sheep, the movie. Prior to this movie being made, I was shocked to see a side character from Wallace and Gromit get a spin-off series for younger children. Which isn't to say Shaun the Sheep isn't a great character, it just wasn't expected. So I wasn't sure how I felt about seeing this movie. However, all my worries were put to rest since watching this movie felt like a claymation treat. Much like The Good Dinosaur, the movie relies heavily on visual humor. However, what sets that movie apart from The Good Dinosaur is that it's completely visual. There isn't a line of coherent dialogue muttered throughout this movie, therefore making plenty of jokes hidden in the background or outright showing in the forefront. The plot itself is easy to follow and didn't require me to follow the TV series. Each character's motivation is easy to understand, and it does make you relate to the issues on screen. But as mentioned before, the humor is what makes this movie shine. Unlike other animated movies like The Minions and Hotel Transylvania 2, which rely heavily on gags and jokes, the movie has a better flow to its pacing, allowing audiences to digest the humor. It was an enjoyable flick that didn't require much for me to do, and when it did make me laugh, it never felt forced. So this is going to probably throw some people off, but this was originally going to be the #1 selection, but then I saw another movie and it brought it down slightly to #2. With that, let's talk about Inside Out. What can I say about this film that hasn't been said already? It's well animated, got a great story, engaging characters and design. But if there's one aspect that separates this from the other Pixar movies, is its approach to talking about mental health. It could have easily been a stereotypical angel and demon on the shoulder of our hero telling them what moral choices they should make. However, the approach the movie takes goes into the approaches of modern neuroscience and therapeutic approaches from well-known empirical research. It provides enough entertainment that can help educate kids and adults about the connection between the mind, body, and physical world. Probably the most obvious is our main character's emotions processing her memories, which in effect process her personality. The movie could have taken a darker turn if it dealt with depression or other mental illnesses, but showing the impact of growing up and how we cope with stressful events, this was shown masterfully. It's a wonderful film to watch with great intentions that should be enjoyed for years to come. Before I go to the #1 spot, here are the honorable mentions. These movies were good, but not nearly as good as the movies that made it on my list. If you liked them, by all means, they're still really good movies. So now you're wondering, what movie could have been better than Inside Out? Believe it or not, I didn't even think I was going to be able to see this movie, given that it didn't really get a wide release, but I'm glad I did. So with that said, the #1 animated movie of 2015 is Anomalisa. A little background on this film. This was originally a play written by Charlie Kaufman, who was responsible for writing Being John Malkovich, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and Stroked Ego New York. Synecdoche, New York. The studio responsible for producing Moral Or relied on crowdsourcing to have a feature-length stop-motion movie made. When they reached their goal, they were able to have Kaufman assist in directing, which hands down might be one of my favorite films of his. Kaufman is a brilliant postmodern artist who likes to play with conventions and story structure with a strange focus on self-loathing white men. The movie is no exception, but when you have a medium where you can manipulate the world one frame at a time, it creates an engaging atmosphere and sometimes unsettling. I don't want to say this movie's for everyone, as it does contain plenty of sex and language. For those who can handle that sort of stuff, you're gonna get an interesting tale on how one man's self-loathing blinds him from seeing the world and its individual beauty for droll sameness all throughout. Once he has the chance to see and hear something different, it changes his whole perception. Without spoiling much, despite how much I could talk about this movie, it's a wonderful addition to the mix of great movies Kaufman has produced. So now that you guys know what my favorite animated movies were of 2015, talk in the comments section, let me know if you agree or disagree. Comment and let me know. Now I'm Joey Tedesco, and thanks for watching this countdown on the Cartoon Palooza.